I make it 10, but it depends by which clock I'm looking. So let's get started. We've got a packed agenda, so we'll move through quite quickly. There may be some reorganisation of the agenda depending on whether or not the people have managed to arrive in time for their item, but we'll deal with that as it comes. First item on the agenda then is apologies for absence.
Just apologies from Councillor Cecile Wright.
Thank you. Item number 2 is late items. There are a couple. First, I'm going to invite Councillor Wright, who's raised a late item. So through the chair, would you like to raise it, John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's late items regarding consultation the government's set out in December of last year, following the demise of the Audit Commission in 2015, and then the subsequent process as this new government's decided that these need to be changed because they're not as effective as they should be, as evidenced by the way that external audit has been performed, although this consultation isn't a direct impact. The consultation started in December, and today is the last day that local authorities can submit a response to the consultation. The reason why I bring it is, you know, for like our independent people and internal audit, it's going to have a significant effect on how internal audit is performed around the country. And there are a couple of items of consultation that I think this committee would have benefited from discussing to determine, but I'm not sure whether the council is going to respond to the consultation, and bearing in mind today is the last day for the consultation. So my questions are really, is the council responding? If not, it's the end of the matter, but if they are, I'd like to know what the council's response was on 2 particular items, one of which is should this committee have an independent chair, which is one of the recommendations of the consultation. And, you know, I think members and independents would probably have a view on that. And the second, the consultation, amongst a vast range of other things, asks what support members of Audit Committee would want to make it more effective, because it's looking to make Audit Committees not just advisory, but, you know, part of the formal constitution of local authorities, to give it a lot more because basically of the ineffectiveness of, in their view of the government, of current positions, but also because of issues around why some local authorities have had to declare bankruptcy and go to section 114, and a lot of the feedback, or in all of those, the feedback is Audit and Governance Committee lack of scrutiny has had an impact, not in a lot of them a major impact, but it's consistent part of the impact. So that's my question.
Thanks, Councillor Wright. I could beautifully put, I couldn't put it better, but there are 3 questions which we just need to deal with. First of all, are we to respond? Is there any strong view either way? Have we responded?
Hi, Tony Nash. I'm here for Alison today. We haven't responded individually as a council to this consultation, but Alison's been in talks with Sagoma and Society of Industry Treasurers and been discussing it there. I don't know what the outcome is of that, but I can feedback on your questions when I speak to her. Thank you.
I mean, given the tight turnaround, that probably resolves the matter, unless anybody wants any further debate on support for finance or whether or not a chair should be an independent role, as it is in other authorities. Councillor Bull.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think what might have been helpful if Councillor Wright had raised this prior to this meeting with Alison, and then Alison would have known this was forthcoming and Alison could have responded. Then we would have known where we are, because unfortunately Alison isn't here this morning. Anyway, I get the gist, but clearly we need to know what the officers have replied so that we can have some continuity and show that we're working as a team, as an authority. So I think, Councillor Wright, you should have perhaps dealt with it in a different way, but I agree with the principle, of course. And as far as an independent chair goes, I've got no concerns about that. It's probably a good idea, in actual fact. But, yeah, let's see what Alison says and then take it from there. But if today's the last day to respond, then obviously we're in a sticky wicket, aren't we?
Can I just respond to that, please? Yeah, I actually wrote to to our Section 151 officer straight after the consultation was announced and asking those questions and asking for, you know, whether the audit committee ought to be involved. I had no response.
Thanks for your question. And independence is the precedent across other authorities, and this is a politically independent party as much as possible anyway. So I think there's merit in that. Mr. Dolman.
Thank you. No, just Councillor Wright's point. I think it's not great that if it's about the audit committee, then this wasn't on our agenda a couple of months ago, whenever that consultation was put forward. So I think, you know, my view would be that, you know, we can't be over everything as independent members. We have to rely on the officers to feed things through to us. And I think that should have been fed through, so we had the opportunity to consider a response from the audit committee, not from the officers.
Thank you. Noted.
I think, you know, we are where we are, so there's no point in going backwards on these things. But does anybody want to do a response today? Is it worth doing a response today? I mean, do you feel that strongly about it, John or Sarah or anybody else? You know, we could knock something up today if we wanted to, outside the meeting afterwards, I would suggest, if people feel particularly strongly about it. I'm slightly equivocal about the matter because it's been done through professional bodies, SIPFA and things, and the Society of County Treasurers and people like that will have put had their 10 pence. As an independent member, I have some views which, you know, you might say are coloured by my position, but, you know, does anybody want to do it now? I mean, I don't mean now this minute. I mean after the meeting. It's something after the meeting. Or does anybody feel not that strongly about it?
The challenge in doing so, and Councillor Bolton's already hit it right on the head, is we run the risk of contradicting something already considered by our Section 151 officer. Councillor Kerr?
The expectation is that we haven't put one in from Derby City. And if we have contributed to the comments that have gone in elsewhere, we have only contributed to them, we don't necessarily agree with all of them because other authorities may have different views and have brought different suggestions to the table. I think it is a pity that this wasn't raised with us before. And I see no problem of us putting together a short comment if we wish to as an audit committee, but I don't know if the situation is that it has to come from the authority or whether it can come from an audit committee, because I don't know the rules on that, either our internal rules or our within our constitution in that detail, or the rules, the expectations on the consultation.
Yeah, I'm not sure within terms of reference whether it would need to be a committee or a personal response. Do you know the answer, Councillor Wright?
Yeah, the consultation is actually addressed to local authorities. It doesn't mention audit and governance committee specifically. That's why when I asked about it, I wrote to the Section 151 officer, who, if we were responding, would be responding on behalf of the council. My concern with it really was that so often consultations like this don't come to committees. They, you know, officers respond and we only get information retrospectively. And because it is all about the future of ordinance governance, making them, basically giving them more teeth in the future, but also potentially learning the lessons of why the audit committee went wrong and was disbanded in 2015. I think they're important issues for the council through the audit and governance committee. And in terms of Councillor Kerr's response, there's about 40 questions. I picked out the couple of questions that, you know, I as a councillor would have a direct view on. I've responded on behalf of the Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service, but most of the questions needed to be answered by people who were professionals in this area. So I don't think it's you know, something we could respond to in part.
Thank you. Mr Stone.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the debate is going that it's probably too late in the day to answer. I'm just wondering a way forward on this. I wonder if maybe officers can bring a report which summarises what the consultation is about, because I think Councillor Wright is correct that we as members need to know what is happening, what the government's consultation proposals are, albeit that we've not had opportunity as a council to respond. But I think we need to keep an eye on that as members, because this is going to develop over the next 12, 18 months. This is not just about setting up like a local audit office. This is about addressing the backlog that we've had with statement of accounts. And so I think we need to be kept abreast of that. So maybe if officers can do that for us.
Thank you. So two things then, I guess, to move this forward. One is to ask if there is a response, could we have a summary of that response at some point? And second of all, we're not here to make resolutions because it's a late item, but if we could send a note perhaps to officers to say in future the committee would like as much advance notice as possible for consultations of any nature and make the decision themselves. Mr Sunderland.
We are providing our own response as a firm, which will go through the consultation process. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no more comments or questions on that, we can move on to the main agenda. Thank you. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda is the declarations of interest. Are there any? Item number 4 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November. I won't comment because I couldn't make that meeting. Councillor Bolton. Well, thank goodness we couldn't make that meeting if it was that long. I saw other hands. Mr Stone.
Chair, it just shows me as being present at that meeting. I definitely wasn't present. I wasn't in the country that day. But I did send my apologies.
That explains the time difference. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I was at that meeting and I read through the minutes, but I do have some queries on the minutes. In 4324, it says it was highlighted that the government recently introduced a statutory instrument with which set a backstop date, this is for accounts, of the 13th of December 24. And I wondered, I hadn't made a note of this in my note-taking, and I just wondered whether it was 24 or 25. Which somebody's going to answer me.
In response
Oh, Mr. Councillor Repton, sorry. Thank you. For the updates, we'll make sure that the record is revised. Apologies for the confusion. Mr. Sunderland.
Just in response to Councillor Kerr, it is correct. It wasn't signed off because there was another issue which they did raise at the time, that the statutory period for deposit of the accounts was only 29 days rather than 30 days because included in that 30-day period was a bank holiday. So they weren't in a position to be able to sign accounts off at that point in time. I think is that right, Tony? Yeah. So they weren't in a position to sign accounts off then. Whether they cancel them subsequently, we can hear in a minute. But
Okay.
whilst we're on those minutes, there were quite a number of other points which were made, I suppose, by me in a sense, which the external auditor failed to answer. We didn't answer any of them, to be honest. I mean, you know, the question there about about the delay in the accounts and whether they were adequate working papers, he didn't respond. He did respond to it, but he didn't give a clear answer. He also didn't give a clear answer to the question about why he was making a point about a £1,000 payment being immaterial, a £1,000 payment made by the Derby Homes to the same auditors. He said it was a issue of responsibilities. He didn't respond to that, and he didn't respond to whether the importance of things. So I think whilst he said something, he didn't actually respond to any of the questions. And obviously you weren't here, but he was on the screen. He wasn't actually physically present, but I think that needs to be reflected in the minutes. Say that, you know, I don't think the responses were very clear, whatever, and I think we need to say that in the minutes, because when it comes round to discussions on audit fees, and I imagine Alison's having discussions about audit fees as we speak, not this minute, but I think we need to express our concerns about the external auditor at that in whatever papers we have as a committee. So express our concerns that the answers were not clearly given, or something along those lines. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, there were two other points, Chair, that I was wanting to raise. Under 4424, and I'm not quite sure how procedurally we do this, we were talking about the following up the unresolved resolutions. And we've now had our first meeting, as you know, on those, which I think was very successful and didn't actually follow what we did here, which was talking about the Chair and Vice Chair. But I was thinking it was more successful, and I don't know whether we can bring that back and actually review that resolution and go to the process that we used this time, which I think was good. So it's procedurally, it'd be nice to know whether we need to do that now or whether we can do it later. My biggest concern, though, was when we get down to the Treasury Management mid-year progress. I think that we were supposed to be the body that referred that on to full council. But what is resolved here says, note the actions taken and the progress being made on counter-fraud activities across the council with no reference to Treasury. So I think we've failed to record the resolutions we took on Treasury issues and Treasury management. And I think there were quite a few of them, and that is just wrong.
Thank you. That last point is quite critical. If the resolution under debate was to pass it to full council, we need to make sure not only that the record's correct, but that we actually do that.
Apologies, I'll double check the Treasury Management report from the last meeting. And
Thank you.
Make any amendment.
Treasury management did go to council, so that the action happened, but the recording of it was not there.
Apologies, I think it must just be a typo in the minutes, but yeah, I'll fix that.
Can I propose, Chair, as we have raised a fair number of issues with this, including sort of the specific wording that needs to be written, can I suggest that we hold these minutes over and come back to them at our next meeting?
You can. That's far better than what I was about to suggest, which was that we distribute a new set of, but saving it for the next meeting, even better. I'm conscious that the next meeting's agenda is quite packed, but that is the most sensible approach. Yeah. Mr. Dolman.
Thank you. There's two other errors I've got to point out. The top of page 3 of the pack, or page 5 of 84, the statement says it was highlighted that a resolution to arrange informal meetings between committee members and the chair and vice chair, full stop. It should continue, has been admitted and requires adding back to the resolution schedule. And it hasn't been added back to the resolution schedule. So that needs amending. As it stands, it just doesn't make any sense. And a very minor point on 4624, which is the counter-fraud update, it should just read, the committee considered a report providing an update, rather a date, on the counter-fraud activities.
Chair, I've just noticed we've got two 4624s.
Oh, yeah.
Apologies, I've captured those, and yeah, we'll bring them back to the next meeting.
Can I suggest, as we're not admitting the minutes of the last meeting now anyway, if there are any further observations, then please can you feed them in outside the meeting, and we can reflect them for the next meeting. Thank you. The next item then on the agenda is the outstanding resolutions. It is worth quickly updating on this. There was a meeting held on Friday in which a number of the outstanding resolutions were discussed with Director roles, and progress was made on each point. A very successful meeting in my view. Would anyone else who attended the meeting like to share their thoughts?
Chair, I can say I thought it was a very good meeting, but the resolutions we were looking at were not these resolutions in this report. It was the resolutions that we have not yet acted on in our own committee. And I thought that we could apply this similar process as we had on Friday to this table of actions and learn from Friday for this one.
Yeah, we can do that, thank you. With respect to the outstanding resolutions in the pack then, I don't propose to go through each one, but are there any that members would like to call out individually or discuss? Mr. Dolman.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I'm just conscious that there's been no updates at all from, I know this is the whole point of the conversation, but there's no updates at all. So in the last meeting, we still need to add the resolution about the informal quarterly meetings to that schedule. And there was an email, there was a resolution about Richard doing an email on training that hasn't been added to the resolutions either from that last meeting. So the point I just want to say is, you know, the last item on the resolution from last time was that we would add red, amber, green ratings to this report, and I think we're in a sorry state that 2 months after we can't even do a red, amber, green rating. And I don't quite know how, if we can't do simple things, how we're ever going to solve some of the more complex outstanding matters. And I just think we need to do a lot of things better. Which I will write to you about outside of this meeting, if that's okay.
Yes, that is okay. I can update you on the RAG statuses. That has been implemented, but it was after the pack was released. So look forward to the next pack. On the other points, thank you. Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you. Similar point, really. These are the resolutions from this committee. And as Tony mentioned, they haven't changed since last time. And although there are individual responsible officers for individual actions, I wonder if there's anybody with overall responsibility for making sure these actions take place.
Thank you. So it's probably worth sharing that this came up in the pre-meet earlier this week. Progress is being made to nail that exact point down. Resolutions from this committee, I know some of them have, well, vanished, frankly, and I know that some of them have not been followed up on, but we did discuss in our pre-meet a mechanism to make sure that stops and is no longer an issue going forward. Thank you. Does anybody want to discuss any individual outstanding resolutions, or shall we just take the update as printed? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I think if we take Councillor Kerr's recommendation that we go through a similar process with this, then I think we should wait for that. But there are some very old resolutions here, and the point that you made on the pre-meet on Monday, there's some that are in the minutes but that aren't on here, so it's a question, we don't know what we don't know. We would have to go back through all the minutes of the past 12 months to make sure we're up to date, but getting these sorted out as a matter of urgency I think would be a good first step.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there is an underlying theme here that it's, the administration appears lacking, but it has been discussed, raised very recently, and improvements will be made. Councillor Cuss.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the risk, and I would just, is there an update on the PCI compliance team? Is there being one formed? Because there's 5 risk under the PCI compliance, and if we do become PCI compliant, that's 5 knocked off the list, which is quite a big number.
Good point. Is anybody putting? Yeah, Tony.
Yes, the group has been formed. They've met several times. We met this Yeah, we met this week as well. I think there's 8 actions on there. 7 of them should be completed by this Friday. There's just one outstanding one, and that involves a couple of external companies, so it's taken a bit longer to get that information back. But yeah, I would say that I assure you that's on track. Thank you.
Thanks for the update. So feed that update into internal audit so the actions can be recorded. Yeah, thank you. Any more? Councillor Catt.
As we go through the process that Councillor Wright suggested of looking at all these, I think we need to remember that, like other resolutions, like the internal audit resolutions, these could become out of date. And if we think, if a subgroup wants to review these and say, actually, this has been superseded, we just need to bring a report back to the next committee to say how we've resolved these and what is being recommended to the full committee.
Yeah, sure. So standard practice, I understand, would be that once a matter is resolved, it shows on the report one more time as resolved and then goes off the report. So if we're happy to do that, then that's what we'll do. So, yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I know you mentioned about the updating about the RAG rating. Was it worth having when one of these was actually last updated? Because unless you go back and look at the previous one, see if there actually has been an update, you don't know looking at this. Just an idea.
Good practice again. I mean, the inclusion of a column seems quite simple, but could we get the information to populate the column? Is it available somewhere?
The information in terms of when it was last updated, I think it's already there, isn't it? Target dates / rationale for delays. That's got dates next to it.
I think what we're trying to capture is the date that a last activity was taken, a last decision was made, or an action was performed. Is that right, Councillor Wilson? Yeah. So it might be that column will appear and then populate over time, because I'm not sure we've got the record to hand. But thanks, it's a good point. Are there any more questions or comments on outstanding resolutions? Mr. Barnum?
I can update on the e-learning, the fraud awareness. We're in the process now of, we've actually identified the system as it says here, but we're now in the actual purchasing a subscription, annual subscription to it. What we're going to hope is that it'll be added to the council's e-learning portal, and will be everyone will have to do it as mandatory, but only every 3 years, not every year. And any new starters will have to do it as part of their induction. But at the moment, we're just going through the rigmarole of making sure we're getting everything's proper under the purchasing requirements. I don't drop the Section 151 officer in it for purchasing something illegally. And then we've got to have a look at the system and tailor it for Derby City, and then hopefully be able to run it, roll it out from the 1st of April.
Thank you. Good to see progress being made. So we now know the latest update for that action was today. Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, we'll move on to the next item, which is an update from external audit. We do have external audit with us today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. A brief update. So we've noted to you before that due to the impending backstop date of the 28th of February, we'd be issuing what's called a disclaimed opinion, which essentially will say we haven't done enough work to form an overall view. There just isn't enough time to cover enough, given the opening balance position over the last few years being disclaimed as well. What we have been doing, though, is we have been engaging with the authority and carrying out various work to support what's called the rebuilding phase. So, which is a long-term plan of how do you get back to a non-disclaimed opinion, if that makes sense. So we've done various work around what we call them entity-level controls. So those are the council-wide control environment. We've also done some work around the IT general controls and control environment around the IT system, as well as some aspects of substantive testing around balances within the financial statements, including some for want of a better word, discovery work around the programme of asset valuations so that we understand the methodology, and if there's a potential issue with the methodology, we're flushing it out now so that when we get to doing the detailed testing, we're in a place where we're able to address all of that early and up front. The only aspect around rebuilding assurance that remains uncertain is, again, if I allude back to the verbal matter raised earlier on, we're still waiting for the system leadership to come together and define what that rebuilding assurance phase actually looks like. So we're still waiting for some guidance on that. Again, just to pick up, there was a comment a little bit earlier on around audit fees. So I will mention now, backstop audit fees are through discussion with public sector audit appointments. So they're going through a stage of working out what that should be and what that should look like. So we're beholden to them. For you as an organisation, we've done what we need to do to get to the disclaimed opinion, but we've done the additional procedures to help us move forwards into this rebuilding assurance phase. And then lastly, it was the work, we're in a very good place to be able to issuing a report to you. Having looked at the forward plan, though, there isn't a committee in February, and the backstop date is the 28th of February. So what I would ask is, outside of this meeting, is perhaps to consider whether or not an additional meeting should be convened, or if there are arrangements to delegate some authority. I think my personal preference would be to be able to give you a full report so you can see how we do things. But I would just suggest somebody takes that offline rather than discuss because of diaries, etc. Then I'm just happy to take any questions about anything.
Thank you. Before we do that, does anybody have a preference or a view on the update on offer prior to the 28th of February? Councillor Kerr?
We have talked about having subgroups looking at other things, and it may be that we could hold a formal meeting and pick up those other issues following on the same occasion.
Proposal then being to form a subgroup to receive a report. Mr. Sunderland?
I would have thought it would need to be a formally constituted meeting to formally accept the things, to be personally, rather than a kind of casual, rather than anything less than that, because it needs to be formally reported, received whatever we get from next week, and then reported onwards. So I don't think we can do this in any informal way. It needs to be done properly. Sorry.
That was my intention, Chair, that we have a formal meeting, but because we're all together, we then move on into the less formal meeting and discussion points that we have already raised. Because we'll all be ready. So it won't mean people needing to come to the building for an additional occasion, because we could have the formal meeting on the same time as doing the informal things. Same morning.
I think I'm with you. Councillor Bolton?
Yeah. I think we need to have a special meeting of this committee. We don't want a working group. We need to be all together. What's the point of having a working group and then having a committee meeting? Absolutely. We need to have one meeting, give the time allocated, all be here and do it in the one meeting. And we need to do it, obviously, in time with the timescale that's been outlined. We need a meeting in February, end of. No further discussion is required.
So I've got a different route to the same conclusion, and that is that I'm not sure that a working group would have the opportunity to report back into full committee in time. And the other thing, given that the committee is made up of such a few number, perhaps a working group would be made up from effectively the size of the committee anyway. But that's just a different way to the same destination. Okay. Moved, seconded. Councillor Kerr, did you want to comment? Oh, you were seconding. Two seconders, I'll let you weigh that one. Is everybody okay with having a special meeting to receive that information before the end of February? Okay, great. We'll resolve that. Thank you. Now then, does any member or co-opting member have any questions or comments for external audit?
Well, it's not so much for Mark. It's we were promised the VFM. They weren't given the VFM opinion on the 13th because of this issue about the deposit period. Have we had any opinions at all of any sort from the previous auditors on anything?
Yes, because it was late, it didn't meet the 13th deadline, but it came back on the 18th, so we have had some information back, so I'll discuss with Alison how that's passed.
What have we had back?
We've had the accounts back, we've had the accounts back disclaimed, and we've had the...
We've had the account disclaimer opinion on which year's accounts? All 3 years?
All 3 years,
And the VFM as well?
yes, yeah.
So are we now fully up to date as we can be with disclaimer accounts?
Yes, yes, we're fully up to date as accounts. Sorry, I didn't realise it's not been discussed. Yes, we're fully up to date with that.
So this has not been reported to? Yeah.
Right.
This is the first thing we've heard about.
Right, sorry, I didn't
So I
realise.
think we need perhaps you to explain exactly what we have received.
It'd be easier to pull something together and send it round to you.
Okay, yeah, well, because, I mean, so everything's up to date as, so not a problem about, the only issue he's got about brought forward figures.
Yeah, I mean, because they're disclaimed, there is going to be a lot of work.
Carry on with his work, no problems.
Yes.
All the previous work, they've given an opinion on everything they can do at this point in time.
Yes, yeah.
The VFMs and the opinion, just disclaimer. So what we're waiting on is a proper, full opinion once the...
Yes, but that will be from Mazars now. They'll take...
Mazars can only comment on 4, 5 onwards, can't they?
No, because they'll have to go back and do work on previous years. That's the issue, because with the disclaimed, they will have to be assured of previous years before they can sign off new years.
You've got a comment on previous years?
Well, the disclaimer by the previous auditor. So given that this is a disclaimed set is from the previous auditor, I don't think Mazars would be comfortable. Well, I'm speaking on your behalf. Would you like to comment?
So what it sounds like, for clarity, I think there's a proposal to have a meeting in February. During that meeting, it might be helpful to have the auditors, EY's audit opinion, not necessarily the full accounts, but the opinion itself, which is a couple of pages over the disclaimed years. What they will have said, and I'm paraphrasing, is that the financial position for the last 3 years is not audited. So the opening balances that I rely on in terms of all of your assets and your general fund reserves, I have no assurance over. And that contributes to the fact with limited time, you're building up a lack of evidence to support the closing position at the 31st of March 2024. Hence, we'll be issuing a disclaimed opinion saying we can't issue an opinion on that. We are waiting for final guidance on what's called the rebuilding assurance phase, which will cover how do you get to a clean opinion without those historic balances. So we think there will be a level of testing going back over all of those earlier years in order to build up to a clean position. So for example, I think if the 22-23 bank reconciliation was not audited, we will have to go back and have a look at that because it forms a fundamental part of the balances in 2025, 26, 27, etc. And the same with aspects such as even non-cash elements like depreciation, because they affect your reserves. So over time, what we're waiting for is the guidance. So historic numbers will be audited at some point. Otherwise, I'm not sure when we'll get into a place where we'll ever be able to issue a clean opinion.
That's a lot clearer than I was phrasing it. Thank you. There's a little queue. I'm going to work through quickly. Possibly never. Mr. Webster.
I think I'm right in saying that at the last meeting we did receive disclaimed opinion. What we didn't receive was a value for money report. And if that's come through since then, perhaps that needs to be brought to this committee and maybe could be brought to the extra meeting in February, which we already received.
Certainly, I think that's a good idea. Fit in time for the February meeting. I know we don't have a date yet, but thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I was very much supporting that. I think we need to have a public statement as a committee and as an authority about where we stand with past auditors and their opinions. So I think going to our next additional meeting would be a substantive additional item for that agenda, and I think an important one, because just having it as a minute here I don't think is is good enough. But the second thing is that if we now have that value for money statement, I think we can move forward one of the resolutions that we had as a committee about writing with our concerns about the way in which we've been processed. That would have been, could have been an update on that resolution sheet, and I think it's one, Chair, that if my interpretation is right, that we should be taking forward at this point.
We should, as a minimum, explore that whether we can, and if we can, we should. Yeah, that's captured, right? Good points, thank you. Are there any other comments, questions, interactions that you'd like with external audit? Thanks again for coming. We can move on then to internal audit. We're here in numbers again. Thanks for coming. Would anybody like to present a brief update?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, of course, the meeting on Friday will have cut across some of the things in this report, and things have moved on, and I'll update committee when we get to that particular point in the report. The last report we brought to you was to the November meeting, so not a great deal has changed with Christmas having been in the way. So we've only had one audit that's actually been completed in that period, which is the stewardship of council vehicles / fleet maintenance, fleet management, which came out as reasonable. The details there of that. Also, we've removed one item from the plan, as you can see on page 6 of this report, around the management of sort of asset management. So again, that's down to the fact that they've had 2 heads of service posts vacant. So we've agreed that we'll move that one into the 25-26 audit plan and pick it up there, because they haven't really got sufficient resources to actually meet what we will need from the audit itself. If we move down then onto the recommendations, which is usually the main thing we talk about. We had the meeting on Friday where we looked at those moderate risks that have been outstanding for some time in Place Directorate. I can report that one of those around building consultancy, we've now had the evidence come through, so we're able to close that recommendation off. So that's one good thing that's come out of it. And they're actively working on a couple of the other areas of the building consultancy one as well. We're still waiting for other information to come through from that, and I believe that the meeting has been minuted, and I don't know, have those minutes been circulated yet, Craig?
It hasn't been circulated. I'm just going to incorporate your comments, which you shared yesterday, and then I'll do that after this meeting.
Just to go through then the highlighted recommendations. Again, I'll ignore the place ones. There's a number there from Peoples. I will point out on one of them, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed on the, there's 2 recommendations on the local authority designated officer, the LADO, and around safeguarding. Unfortunately, there's another recommendation has fallen due, which is recommendation 4. And unfortunately, the summary of weakness, recommendation and management responses also are the same as they are for recommendation 2. So for some unknown reason that the same thing has fallen into both boxes there. The status update comments are correct on it, but just for the benefit of committee, what the control issue was on the recommendation 4 was around access to the LADO's files were not properly restricted and consistently managed across 3 systems, namely Liquid Logic, OpenText and the file server itself. And so we'd recommended that the access to the LADO files held in Liquid Logic, OpenText and the file server should be checked to ensure access is appropriately restricted. So that's what that one was about. But we'll make sure that's reflected properly in the next report that comes up if it hasn't been closed off, of course, by then. That's all I really wanted to say on this report, Chair. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. First of all, Councillor Repton.
Just looking through the actual Central Midlands Audit Partnership report on page 4 and page 5, see adult safeguarding, the actual assignment percentage that's complete is 0. Same with asylum seeking children 0. Youth Justice Service 0. Derby and Derbyshire Waste Treatment Centre not allocated yet 0. And Planning and Development Control 0. Is there any reason for the Audit Committee to be concerned about?
It's because we do quarterly planning, so these items are falling into the quarter 4 planning in a lot of cases. So we've allocated them out, and they will be picked up It's an ongoing rolling plan anyway. It's not like an annual plan. What we do anyway is we schedule audits throughout the year. So we can't just we can't start every audit in May of each year, for example, or April. So we stagger them throughout the year. I mean, we will get them done. They've been allocated to auditors and the work will be started soon. So that's all I can really say on that. At the end of the day, I need to make sure, as they call it under the standards, the Chief Audit Executive, that I've got enough work been done throughout the year that I can give an opinion to the authority on the governance, risk and control environment. And as long as I've got enough work done on that, and I can give that assurance to the audit committee, then that's the main part of it. If I don't think I've got enough work done, or I haven't got enough intelligence coming in for me to enable me to give an assurance opinion, then I would raise that with the audit committee anyway.
Thank you. So in effect, we're saying not started at 0%. Presumably then these items will reappear in the work programme.
They will crop up all the time, Chair, until they're actually complete.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Repton? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, it's along a similar line as Councillor Repton. Artificial intelligence, 70% completed, and the waste management, as we've said, is not started. Both of these issues come up regularly, both in this committee, at full council, and just about every other forum of the council. So what I'm suggesting, I know it depends on how much assurance you've got once you've completed those, but I think it would be worthwhile actually calling out those when they're finished, particularly if there's limited or no assurance. But in any case, they're so important to the council, I think it would be helpful if you gave us a brief overview of that. And my third one is the youth justice one. I've got a particular interest in that and concern. So I've got a question, Richard. I know in other authorities, audit and governance committee members can actually observe and participate in internal reviews. That offer's made to them, particularly where they've got a particular interest. Is that something you could offer to members of this committee?
If I recall, many years ago, we did take the chair of committee on an audit with us. Which one was it?
I can't remember the audit. Several years ago. I might talk about.
So we have done it in the past.
If it's not a particularly sensitive matter, mind you, having said that, all the members are NDA'd and what have you, is that something you're prepared to offer to members if there is an interest?
I don't see why not, Chair. I mean, it gives an insight into how we do our work.
Can I suggest that expressions of interest are made outside committee and appropriate judgment deployed at the time?
Can I just pick up on the AI and the waste management one? There's a lot going on around the waste one that Martin and I are involved in that, but we are reliant on others. So at the moment, we can't get any work done because they're also talking to the county's auditors. So there's a lot going on in the background, which means that this may not get started for some time anyway. Around the AI, the approach we've taken is I've been attending the AI compliance board. So what I'm doing is getting assurance from sitting on the compliance board and seeing what's going on there. And another one of my auditors has been sitting on the debt management AI board as well to get. So what we're doing is we're just having a look at how they're handling those. So we're not going into the realms that gets mentioned around the other AI in here, such as Perry and all that type of stuff. So that's not something we're picking up at the moment. What we're looking at is the role of the compliance board. How are they dealing with things that are coming through to them? Can I get assurance that the compliance board is doing its role and that the debt management AI board is doing its role? So that's what we'll be doing, but we can sort of give you an overview of our thoughts on that. We're not covering the whole thing, so what we're looking at is how those two bodies are dealing with the things that come before them.
Thank you. I mean, it's an interesting point, and there's a lot of debate right now across the risk world, if you like, about the ongoing nature of change. I mean, this is a bit of a painting the Forth Road Bridge job, and constantly a point-in-time audit now. The argument is that a point-in-time audit is no longer sufficient for things like AI, which evolve the second after you close your file. I don't know what you want to do with that, but it's on my horizon scanner, and now it's on yours. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, thank you. I've got several questions on that, but on the report. Can I start with the one that's just been reported as complete on payroll, and ask, it's been given substantial, and I'm just going to ask whether it included looking at levers and potential overpayments and return of IT and those sorts of things regarding, you know, particularly from payroll. It's whether we are paying people who've left. Because I know that can be an issue for a number of organisations. And I've got some other questions. Do you want them one at a time, or do you want them all?
It's easier one at a time then.
Okay, so answer is we don't know. The second one is a concern in terms of the report back on the council's vehicles and fleet management. The vehicle and plant inventory was not accurate and only considered by management to be 80% complete. And we're not expecting that to be resolved until the end of August. It seems a long time for what could be quite significant assets, not to know whether we've got them or not. So I just wondered why we were having that as a moderate risk with such a long end date.
Again, the target dates are put forward by management. They will know how quickly they can do these various things. We have got some other work going on around assets and stuff in the depot anyway, so that may pick up on other things. But in a lot of cases, you know, we're reliant on management telling us when they think they can get things, and we can say to them, yeah, oh, okay, it's a moderate risk, we want this doing tomorrow. And we're being unrealistic. The thing is, they know their systems, they know how long they will need to do these various things, so we have to rely on them. If we felt that it was too long, if they said, oh, August 2026, we'd say, well, that's not reasonable. But yeah, Martin's got some update on this one anyway.
Chair, my next one is the security of corporate buildings, which was October 24, which sounds quite an important thing, and we've got 6 actions due on that. And I don't know, maybe we've solved, you know, another 20 because there was some major issue and we've just got 6 left. But it's a bit worrying.
Again, as you can see, it's action due. It's just getting able to get feedback on the various risks that are there and the recommendations and how they are progressing with them. So we can only report to you when we get stuff back. So if the committee feel that there's issues there, then it might be something you wish to raise with management.
Particularly in terms of building security, there was an incident last month which raises the profile of this matter, and I think it warrants further discussion and a tighter timescale, personally.
Do you think, Chair, we should ask for a specific update on that one for our extra meeting?
Yeah, perhaps not for the extra meeting, and I'm also conscious that March's agenda is quite packed, but we should certainly ask for an update. Did you want to go through them, or did you want to feed them back outside committee? Of course. Thank you. Yeah.
Answer. In relation to the inventory, we can now confirm that the vehicle inventory is 100% accurate, as is the plant inventory. What's taking the time up until the August deadline is the smaller handheld items which require to be logged and recorded, because there's just hundreds and hundreds of them. So they're currently working through that now and checking that. But the two big number items, obviously vehicles and main heavy plant, are now all on there, are recorded accurately and are obviously now held.
Are there any more queries or comments on the audit progress report or the quality assurance report in Schedule 2? Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you. I'll have a few, I'm afraid. First of all, looking at the audit recommendations, I noticed that the figures in the table ending on page 10 are not coming down. These are the figures for the actions dues or delayed actions. Now, I know Richard's expressed the opinion that the new audit system will help with that, and I wondered when that system is going to be implemented and in place. And allied to that, of course, some of these outstanding recommendations were discussed at the meeting on Friday, and I wondered if there was any other further meetings of that sort to be arranged with other directorates. That's my first two questions.
I can answer the second one. Yes, absolutely. I feel like it was a success. I think that's a supported view, and there will be more. On the first point, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, the rollout of the new audit management system, we've been using it since April. There are issues that we're still talking to the developer around, certainly around the reporting from it. I mean, we've got two reports that should be generated from the system, one being the individual assignment reports, which we think we're virtually there on that one now, and then the other one is the progress report that comes to this committee and other audit committees that they're still working on. We are starting to roll it out now across the partnership. The problem with Derby City is the absolute size of everything. If you can, so we've started with the smaller organisations to see how it all pans out there and make sure it runs properly and smoothly, and whether we can pick up on it if there's any issues coming out of these, rather than roll it out to Derby, find there's lots of issues. What we're planning on doing is looking at giving access to the strategic directors and the service directors, but if you start going any lower than that, we're suddenly finding that we've got to roll it out to hundreds of officers that are going to be commenting on these. So we need to come up with some solution as to how officers are going to input into the recommendation module on that one. It's the smaller organisations, we've got, we're talking of 20 people maximum that have got access to the system. At Derby, we could be looking at 5 times that. And so it's getting it right, because IT at Derby have also got to then roll it all out to everybody because of the configuration of our machines. We can't actually update the software, so we have to rely on IT to do that. And there's a significant update to go on at the moment. We can't do that, because the moment we do that, it blocks it and also wrecks our access to that, so we have to rely on IT doing that. Other organisations are slightly more relaxed on that, and they can certainly, the auditors there can update their system. But yeah, it is something that will aid it, because what we need to do is keep on top of that though, and keep the system will remind people, but we also need to, via the chief executive as well, keep reminding officers that there are outstanding recommendations that need updating.
Thank you. I know you're keen on moving that forward. Mr. Webster.
Yes, so my other question really was on the CAPE, and in particular on the new global internal audit standards. Now I know they're not, you don't have to be not implemented until the 1st of April, as you quite rightly said in the paper. But there are some actions in the time frames document from CIPFA to be done sort of round about March, April time, such as the new strategy mandate and charter. I wondered if Richard was well on with preparing those to bring them to this committee.
Yeah, we're fully aware of what we need to be doing. We're trying to roll it out across the partnership to 8 partners. So what we need to make sure is we've got consistency on all of those. I will be bringing a report to the March meeting around the changes in the standards, and also the code of practice on governance of internal audit, which is relevant to the management of Derby City Council and how it looks at how it deals with internal audit, and also the Audit and Governance Committee as well, and how that deals with internal audit. So that's coming to the March meeting. The charter, etc., we'll be looking to bring. We normally bring that with the audit plan report, but we may have to delay that just slightly. However, the message I've been getting from CIPFA is as long as you've got you're not expected to have conformed with the standards on the 1st of April, as long as you've got a plan in place to show how and when you're going to meet the various things, then that is good enough for the time being. What they're saying is, as well, any audit section that conforms with the public sector internal audit standards currently shouldn't have any problems conforming with the new global standards. And CMAP, we had ours in 2022, I think, and we conformed at that particular point in time. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be conforming with the new standards, with just a bit of tweaking here and there.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I just want to comment on the QAPE, Quality Assurance Improvement Plan. Occasionally items on here, we get updates and changes, and I just wondered if it could be presented with the refreshed items in bold or something, so that we don't need to reread all of them and try to work out whether it's changed since last time. So it's just a presentational issue for us. Thank you.
Can you amend the format? Yeah, thank you. I'm just quickly scanning through there and seeing how many items are reliant on K10 implementation, and I assume we've captured somewhere the risk of a K10 failure, because it looks like we're becoming more and more reliant on it.
That's covered in the CMAP risk register.
Thank you. Any more? Yeah, Mr. Dolman.
Thank you. Just one. I didn't quite catch the PCI compliance conversation earlier, but so just one question on that. With the five audit recommendations that are outstanding in this pack, did you say that you were looking to close those down by March, or is it just an update that's coming on those audit actions in March?
I can't remember mentoring March, but I might
Sorry,
have done. I'll have to go
it's
back.
Okay, let me rephrase that then. The original actions have now been a sort of a month. The original sort of end of 23, and they've been kicked down the can till March 25.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get some assurance whether we can expect them to be resolved in March, or your view will be, following the working group's been set up, the actions will be further moved.
No, they won't be further moved. There's 8 actions on the group. They must have split the 5 down into 8, and by this Friday we'll be updating audit on 7 of those. There'll be 1 outstanding, but by March that should be satisfied.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more members? Okay, thank you. Internal audit. The next item then, which I believe we are in a position to move forward on, is the risk assurance update.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. My name is Catherine Mawson, and I'll be introducing this report today. So this is a standard report to update the committee on risk assurance activity that's taken place over the first 6 months of the financial year 24-25. So this covers up to the end of September 2024 or the end of Q2. In July 2024, the Audit and Governance Committee considered the year-end risk assurance report for 23-24. And at that committee, there were a number of recommendations noted that I just wanted to note here. So 2 are covered in the report presented, and 1 will be picked up in March as part of the risk strategy and handbook refresh. So in Appendix 2, where risks are both a threat and an opportunity, both scores are now included in the latest risk score column to allow greater clarity of their reporting going forward. In paragraph 4.5 of the report, the frequency that the strategic risks are monitored is included to ensure clarity of that process within the report. And the risk target scores were recommended for inclusion alongside the risk score and tolerance scores. This is being considered as part of the refresh of the handbook and strategy, and the committee will be updated on this in March. It hasn't been added to the report at this point in time until that has been refreshed. So recommendations of the report for the committee are to note the assurance assessments for each stage of Derby's risk management processes presented in Appendix 1, alongside the opportunities for improvements that will be progressed during 2025, and to note the overview of our strategic risk register, including assurance activities planned or completed, which is presented in Appendix 2. Presented in paragraph 4.2 of the report is a summary of the key developments over the last 6 months of the ongoing implementation and strengthening of our strategy and handbook. I'm not going to go through all of those, but just to highlight a few, this has included ongoing review of department risk registers, with the assurance team continuing to work with colleagues to record those in a centralised log aligned to business plans. And as the business plans are refreshed for the next financial year, there'll be further work ongoing on those. The risk appetite statements have been reviewed with Corporate Risk Management Group, CLT and Cabinet to inform the refresh of the risk management strategy and handbook, with sessions taking place in October and November last year. And the self-assessment risk maturity has been refreshed with input from Corporate Risk Management Group to inform that refreshed handbook and strategy also. There has also been targeted risk review activities over the last 6 months as presented in paragraph 4.8. So these have included various strategic risk reviews and redefining. We've also started to look at the limited assurance audit reports, which are highlighted to Corporate Risk Management Group quarterly. They're now being cross-referenced with our risk registers to inform a more joined-up approach between audit and risk assurance, and that will be an ongoing action to help inform and steer those conversations. It should be noted that there are no strategic risks identified for a risk surgery as part of this report, as adequate assurance is judged to be in place for all risks currently on the register. And I will be back to update you in March with the refreshed risk strategy and handbook. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I appreciate the layout here. We're talking about the progress in 2024, presumably up to the end of September, and then the opportunities looking forward. And it's just on one of those that I was wanting to ask, and I've got a further question. So in terms of the risk management progress, and I'm looking for page numbers and we haven't got any, it talks about risk and opportunity identification. So this is on the second page of the table. And it says there's obviously been a lot of actions last year, and then it says further embed in the department and develop emerging risk logs. Further embed is the outcome, the intention. It doesn't actually say what's actually happening. Later on, there is talk about things like training, which is really positive. But I just felt that further embed doesn't actually tell us what's happening. I don't know how to tick off. It doesn't sound like a smart comment. And I just wondered whether it was something that I was missing, or whether maybe the wording there could be made smarter in that term. Is that the first question?
Let's deal with that one first, making it measurable.
Yeah, thank you. We have started creating the department risk register, and it is definitely a work in progress. So in terms of further embedding it, the assurance team are working with individual heads of service and directors, and we are aligning that with the business plan refresh process for 25-26 to ensure that we're capturing those department risks on that register and refreshing any that are there at that point. So there is an action plan in place, and absolutely I take your point that we can word that more accurately going forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo the point, further embed, I'm not sure we understand the current state of embedment or what's required to make it qualify as further. So I'll strongly agree with the point raised and appreciate your offer to tighten the language up. Councillor Kerr.
The second one I think is really ambitious, and I'm now within risk appetite understanding, and the bullet point at the end in terms of action, I think risk appetite is interesting, and I don't think it's something that's widely understood, but it's work to ensure Derby's risk appetite is understood by all levels of the organisation and used to inform and assist decision making and planning, with the benefit of risk management understood by all. I'm not sure that we're ever going to get everybody understanding risk management. You know, the guy who's emptying my wheelie bin doesn't really need it, but he's part of our organisation. So I think we're over ambitious on that one. So again, it's semantics, but it's just nice that it's there. And then into the next table, and looking at the individual risks, we've got the health, well-being, sickness-related absence, and there's been no change in the risk level on there. But it would be nice to have some commentary that would give us some sort of indication as to whether sickness levels are an absence is holding level, or whether the trend is towards better or towards worse, so that we can have a feel. I know it's monitored in many other places, but to have a sort of at least a slight review on the context here would be helpful, I think.
I think it's a good point. It sat slightly uneasy with me last week to hear that there was an attitude of various operational matters are being taken care of by people putting in additional hours. And since then, matters related such as this one has sat slightly uneasy with me. So I think that's a really important point that's just been raised.
So just to come back on the first point about risk appetite and wanting to ensure it's understood by all in the organisation. Our framework does state that it's the responsibility of all colleagues within the organisation to have an understanding of risk management framework, and it is aspirational, I understand that, but that's how we currently word it within our handbook and strategy. And yes, I understand from a day-to-day position, not every colleague might need to apply that understanding. And then on the second point around the health, well-being and sickness-related absence risk, there are more details reported on a quarterly basis to Cabinet. So the Q3 position will be coming in February as part of the performance report. This is very high level at this point within this risk report that we bring, but I can look to include further details specifically around that risk going forward to give that understanding on that risk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember now, Mr. Dolman.
Thank you. Not sure if I was next, but I'll go for it. Catherine, you mentioned, I think, sorry, three questions. Question one, Appendix 2, you put two different scores in. I couldn't see that in the appendix. So perhaps you went quite quick for my slow brain.
So the last couple of pages, the AI technology programme risk, the East Midlands...
What page are we on, sorry?
So of the appendix, it doesn't seem to have printed the page numbers for...
So Appendix 2?
Appendix 2, the last two pages of that appendix.
Ah.
Oh, thank you. There are three risks currently on our strategic risk register. The AI technology programme, East Midlands County Combined Authority, and the ageing inappropriate property portfolio maintenance. Those in the second column, the latest risk score, treatment and direction of travel, now have two boxes. So they have the threat risk score at the top and the opportunity risk score at the bottom. So that is now captured within there. They're the only risks that have both of those scores because they're the only risks that we currently have that are an opportunity and a threat within the risk register. So the others all just have the one box for the threat risk for those.
Okay, sorry, that I understand now. So is that score, is that the latent risk before any controls, or is it the...
That's the mitigated risk score within that field.
Right, and is that where we want to end up with all the actions in... Is that where we are now then, or where we do want to end up when all the controls are in place?
That's where we are now, so that's the current position rather than a target score or a tolerance score.
Because I think we did talk as well about putting a target score in.
Yes,
yeah,
which is referenced in the handbook. It isn't currently part of our risk template, so we don't have it as standard as a risk target, but as part of the risk handbook strategy handbook refresh, we're looking at including that, so that's being reviewed as part of that, and we'll bring that back to committee in March before including that within the report going forward.
So will I be able to see from the reports you bring here where we are and where we want to get to?
Yes.
We will?
That's the aim, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That was question one. Apologies. Question two, which is perhaps a more relevant one. On Appendix 2, there's a strategic risk about data and records management, which is SR8 CR7. And for 2 years in a row now, in the actual commentary, we've talked about major slippage having occurred, and we've talked about major slippage for the last 2 years. So if I look to the actual Appendix 2, there's 3 established controls in place, with 2 controls now not in place. A year ago, all 5 were in place. There's a progress column that says 3 additional actions in place, 1 on track and 2 reported major slippage. That's exactly the same comment as January 24. The information working group has been postponed as well. So from reading this report, we've had major slippage over the last 2 years. It feels like the controls aren't working as effectively because 2 of the 5 that were in place are now no longer established. And 3 additional actions are on track, but they were on track a year ago. So my question is, I'm concerned that although things are on track, nothing's happened for a year. And I'm quite keen to understand with that particular risk when you think those actions will be resolved and completed.
Thank you. So around this risk, for a wider bit of context, there was the ICO audit at the end of last year, and there are recommendations around that and an action plan in place, and this risk is being looked at as part of that. So I'm expecting that the next time we bring you a report, this one will have been reviewed, refreshed, and have further controls and actions. So it's very much one that is on our pipeline for review and deep dive. But absolutely, I take your point that it has stood still for quite a while.
It'd be good just to get that clarity, I think. Thank you. And my final observation, really, on Appendix 1, which is there's a lot of it's the various activities that are taking place. It just stood out to me when I looked at this report versus last year's that a lot of the words for progress made in 2024 are exactly the same words as 2023. So I'm just sort of wondering if you've done everything in 2023 and you're repeating it all for 2024, are we really... It just feels unusual that it's a copy and looks like it's copy and paste in 90% of the comments, which concerns me.
Well, I will say that risk management is cyclic. We constantly have colleagues leaving, moving roles. We try from a training perspective of having that rolling programme. So there are elements that we have to keep doing. It's not sort of a one and done process with risk management. We are having to keep redoing that. Absolutely take your point. The wording might be very much the same or similar, but there's sometimes no point in reinventing the wheel if that is what we've had to redo as part of our cycle of risk management. So apologies that you feel like it's a cut and paste, but it has been fully reviewed before this report and appendices have come to the committee.
No, I take your point. I just so sometimes looks unusual where you say we've strengthened the handbook and it's exactly the same comments. So unless we keep on strengthening it, it just sometimes jumps out. That's the point.
Thanks. A number of points there. Yeah, I'm also looking forward to seeing the tolerances in March. That'll be interesting. The variance between residual and tolerance will be a big eye opener, I think. Also, I'm not sure if this is coming on the agenda, but it would be interesting to see some level of detail around the feedback from the ICO's visit at some point, if that's not already happening. And there's one more thing, just to make sure it's on your horizon scanner. We've got an action there or a risk rather, SR43, about the East Midlands Combined Authority and devolution. I wonder when the time comes for us to start considering similar risks about local government restructure, which is the hot topic right now. Just to put that on the scanner for you, and you take that away. There's a little queue. I'll come to you in 1 second. First, Mr. Sunderland.
That was exactly my point. I think local government reorganisation is a threat and possibly an opportunity. It is to be considered in the summer, I would have thought. Just with your new ones on AI and the East Midlands and so on, I think that's quite critical. So that I was just going to say the same point as you.
Great minds or fools, huh? Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I think it was a good call about local government reorganisation. I was come back to the data and records management point. And at this level, there's no reference here to the impact that this may have on the AI work that we're doing, because if the data isn't right, the AI won't be right. And I just wonder whether there are obviously quite a lot of actions that are imminent, but it would be, I think it's one we need to keep an eye on, and it might be something that we need to be looking at a risk surgery over to actually deep dive it.
Thank you. That's also on your scanner now. Yeah, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. As you say in your report, it's the job of this committee to look at the risk management framework. I've found that, I know that there's a new performance and risk system, PARS, launched in October last year, which this committee hasn't heard anything about. So I wonder if you could give the committee an update on that, either now or in your reports in the next meeting.
I don't know if this is one you want to take, Heather, or if you, yeah.
Excuse me. Heather Greening, Director of Corporate Management. I think there's probably 2 points I'd like to come back on, actually. First of all, in relation to the white paper and LGR, that has been identified as a risk and opportunity on the emerging risk log. So that is, of course, a big one that we will be exploring in the coming weeks and months, I think. In terms of PARS, so our performance and risk system, yes, it has launched successfully in October. We have used the system to gather our information for both the kind of Q2 and Q3 reports that have been prepared. We're happy to, I think, provide a bit more detail on that in terms of the next risk assurance report that you receive, if that's acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, just a quick one. I'm not as into the detail as some of the other councillors and independent members. So I'm reading into this report that the Appendix 1 is, because it's virtually all green, you're telling us we have very good assurance over risk management in the authority, albeit in Appendix 2 there's some really serious risks there that could impact the council. So for this committee's perspective, that we can be assured that we've got the controls in place. However, when I listen to some of the comments by members, it actually gives me a little bit more cause for concern. So building on what Councillor Kerr said, I mean, I certainly learned a lot more by the deep dive that we did on the recommendations from internal audit. I thought it was a really useful experience. So is there a role for audit and governance committee members in these risk surgeries that you talk about? And if so, again, the other is that something that we could actually request to take place if we don't feel as though we've got the assurance from the feedback? And the one strikes me is AI. You know, it's got such a lot riding on it for the future of this authority, not least in terms of the medium-term financial plan. And I certainly didn't get the reassurance last time that the projected savings and then the mitigation aspect, how that married up. So I suppose my question is, I'm right, am I, that we've got a lot of assurance around the controls, but if we are particularly concerned, we could call for a risk surgery on a particular area, and we could participate in that, so we understood in much greater depth the impact of these risks on the authority.
Without referring to the terms of reference, is that something we're prepared to just agree, or would you like to come back on that?
Sorry. I'd like to come back on the general assurance point. I think as this, this committee is very much aware, we have been on a long journey with risk management and wider assurance. And actually we have made, leaps and bounds. I think leaps and bounds in terms of where we've come from. So I think there is good assurance in relation to the controls that we have in place in risk management, and that is what Appendix 1 demonstrates. We've got a proactive team in Catherine and her colleagues. We've got a very committed corporate risk management group. We've got regular discussion of risks at all of our kind of key senior leadership meetings. Risk is very much at the forefront of what we're doing, particularly because we recognise we're in a very, very dynamic landscape, and that is why our strategic risk register looks the way it is. So I think if I can just give the committee assurance with regards to the risk management framework, the handbook, and I think all of the good work going on around that. Are we perfect? No. And I don't think any authority would say that. There is always opportunity to improve, and we're always looking for opportunities to improve. In terms of risk surgeries, particularly around AI, we have looked at this within the last quarter. So as part of that, we have, drilled down into the particular risk and opportunity, and made further mitigation where it was needed. Now, clearly, if a risk surgery is needed going forward, we would welcome input from this committee. At this point, we don't feel one is necessary, but in the future, that is obviously within the gift of both the risk team and this committee. Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I just back up what Heather said, because I haven't been involved with the committee for a number of years. We started off basically from a position in Sir Derby City of not exactly a blank sheet of paper, but not far off it. This has developed enormously over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and as Heather says, it will continue to develop as it will everywhere else. So I think the position we're in is streets ahead of where we were beforehand, and the problems that arose some years ago are explain why there was no such assurance in the past. Touch wood, things are always going to happen, but we're in a much better position today. It's never going to be perfect. It can always be developed, and I would just back up what Heather says. I think we've made enormous progress over the last 5, 6 years, even in my experience.
A very hard-earned pat on the back there from Mr. Sunderland. Any more comments or queries on risk assurance? In that case, the item on the agenda is for noting, so we'll note the reports as presented. Thanks. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is the Project Management Office update. And I believe we are in a position to receive the update.
Yeah, this is also me. So this is an annual report that we present to the committee. The next report after this one you will see will not be until next January. We have an established programme management office in place, and that's made up of various parts, including the assurance team, the PMO board, and our assurance and development group, which helps to ensure assurance and effectiveness of projects and programmes as they move through the project cycle. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update to the committee on the progress that we've made over the last year, as set out in paragraphs 4.4 to 4.12, and to share the future priorities for improvement as set out in paragraph 4.13. So a few highlights of key developments over the last year have included the assurance team working closely with the project and change hub to align the delivery board decision making with PMO assurance activities. So we're making sure that we're maximising the use of our assurance capacity at the points where it will benefit projects the most. The programme and project PMO pipeline is regularly reviewed to ensure it's up to date, and we've also integrated the delivery board pipeline to ensure we've strengthened that alignment between those two boards. And we are, where possible, working to ensure that gateway discussions are appropriately timed to add the most value through high challenge, high support. And there have been a number of risk-based reviews of complex or high-risk programmes or projects. For example, OCOR and AI technology, with assurance oversight maintained on a monthly basis on those more risky projects. There is a PMO development session scheduled to take place in February 2025. That will bring together the assurance team, PMO board and A&D group members, and will review our current PMO processes, background, assurance role and function, and discuss any future improvements at that. Looking ahead to 2025, there have been various areas identified for further work. So following that development session, we will look to update the PMO guidance pages on My Derby to ensure they're still fit for purpose. The project manager network and SROs will run refresher training sessions on the PMO project governance and assurance, and we will continue to try and embed that alignment with Cabinet, CLT and Delivery Board to ensure that the decision-making processes are aligned with our assurance. Like I say, an update report will be presented to this committee in January 26, and any new or emerging programme or project risks will be reflected in the 6 monthly risk assurance reports that come to this committee. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. It's usually, I cope with the acronyms and so on within what we're doing because they're either explained early on in the report or they are things I've come across before, but this is one that I fell over a bit on. And in the presentation just given, which thank you for, there were also acronyms used there without explanation, which I think may have made it more difficult for people to understand. So I don't know what the A&D group is, for example. And there were several mentions of there was a PM, something with a PMP, was it? Before we actually got a reference to actually tell us what it was. So just a sort of, I like, and I'm sure the report has been written with a desire to ensure that people can understand it. Otherwise, there's no point in writing it. And it's just not. It would have been better for somebody who was less experienced and less know what they were talking about to read it through. But two specific questions in terms of the table, in terms of key developments this year. One is the final point there, which is the annual review of programme and project activities for 23-24, which seems to be quite a long time ago. And I just wondered whether that was actually the title, whether it really did slip, and why it slipped, you know, in terms of, is it something we should be worried about? And then there's the My Derby update to the PMP, that's what I didn't know what it was, and it is explained later on and I've forgotten, have been delayed while elements are rewritten, and I just wondered what time frame that was now going forward in. It's actually listed as completed.
If you're happy to answer, I just wanted to echo the point there that one of the most wonderful things about this committee is that you don't need, it's not prerequisite for you to have a level of qualification or knowledge on risk or audit if you're appointed as a member. Different, of course, for co-opted members who could run rings around a lot of us. But just it is something to bear in mind. It's just the feedback for you. On the other point, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you. I'll make sure going forward that we are a bit more wary of those acronyms and we make sure they're covered. In terms of that, looking at 23-24, the PMO development session, as mentioned, was due to take place last year. Unfortunately, due to capacity, it has ended up being pushed back to this February. So there is a delay in doing that. In terms of the My Derby guidance, the guidance that is currently in place, it is marked as completed on that as it is still stands. So any updates will be made following that development session if there are changes to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments or queries? Councillor Wright?
Yeah, just a quick one. On a number of occasions, I've asked individual projects, like, for example, the libraries, like AI, for they must, I assume, provide some sort of regular project update, whether we as councillors could have access to those, you know, where it doesn't include information that might be commercially sensitive, for example. And despite on a number of occasions, they say, yeah, absolutely no problem. There obviously is a problem because I've never yet received any of them. I'm assuming it's because they're so focused on delivering the project that some of these peripheral communication issues, slip to the bottom of the list. And I understand that and respect it to a large extent. So I suppose my question for you is, you must have access to those, and I imagine you do some sort of a project update, program update, where you look at the overall status. Is that something that we could have access to? So I feel constantly in the dark until it's decision-making day about, and they're announcing council. So it's very difficult to make a decision when you don't know some of the history behind it. So, from your office perspective, is there a way to get information on the progress of projects to councillors without it becoming a bureaucratic exercise, doing it for the sake of it?
Thank you. Yeah, so both of those projects that you highlighted are on our project management platform, the PMP. The assurance team does have oversight of that, so all the logs and documentation contained within that. Those projects are part of our priority projects, which are reported quarterly as part of the performance report to Cabinet. So the Q3 report with an update on both of those projects will be going in February, so you'll be able to see the latest position. In terms of individual communications from the projects, that is something you would have to take up with the individual projects. But we do have oversight from a PMO perspective, and it's included as part of our performance reporting cycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I mean, following up from Councillor Wright's point, really, the purpose of the PMO, it says here, is to look at the project management and programme activity and outcomes. There's nothing really in this paper about the outcomes. Presumably, the PMO looks at projects when they're finished and sees whether they have met their targets, their objectives, and what the outcomes were. And I wonder if that could be included in future reports, something like along the lines of, I know there were 20 projects completed, 15 met their outcomes, met their objectives, that sort of thing. That would be useful in this report, I think, in the future.
Thank you. So section 4.5 gives an overview of the projects that have come through the PMO board and what gateway they've come through at. So obviously that doesn't go into a lot of detail, but Gateway 5 is lessons, benefits, for example, and we are looking at how we disseminate that information through our PM networks afterwards. We can absolutely go into further detail as needed, but we do try and give you that oversight within that section of the report. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Gateway 5 didn't actually mean anything to me. Is that the end of the project, Gateway 5? Ah, right, okay. So again, there's sort of been 1, 2, 3, 4 projects completed in October there, for example. Again, if there was some information as did they achieve what they were meant to achieve, I think that would be useful.
That information is included on our recommendations log, which is for the PMO board. We can share that as needed, but it's not a standard item that we would share as part of this report.
Are you requesting that?
I think it would be useful for the committee to know that if that happened, yes.
Is that operationally possible? If so, can we do that then? Yeah, thank you. Another for you, Mr. Dolman.
Okay, also, thank you. Not to put you on the spot, Catherine, but when Sarah came, I think, last January, perhaps you can't comment on this now, but there are 2 outstanding resolutions on our thing that should be put in this report, and they haven't been, so maybe it's the housekeeping. We could address that in, if not next January's report, but one that comes a bit sooner than next January. One of those was about those, can't remember exactly what they were. One was about a request from this committee to get some training on the PMO, I think, and what's, if you go back to the resolution, talk about training for this committee. And I just think that might be useful to put back in here, because there's a training plan section that says it's been completed. Well, maybe we can enhance that and see what this committee might want to be better able to input and challenge to what's what's being discussed. So yeah, it's mainly around that. I was just intrigued on information for me. On section 4.8, it talks about 125 open programs, 74 meet the PMO gateway criteria, so 51 don't, I guess. Does that mean they haven't progressed, or what does that mean, that they've met the criteria and 51 haven't?
So our PMP, our project management platform, is scalable. So projects might be very small, they might be service-led, and the budget importance and other elements might not meet PMO criteria, so they don't need that level of assurance. But the aim with the PMP is that you can start with a small project and you can use it for a massive programme. So it is scalable, so it does mean that not all projects on there will meet PMO criteria, so that would be expected, that not all of them would be, but it doesn't mean that the ones that don't haven't progressed.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
And picking up the same point, that I think it would be really useful to put on our committee training schedule some more training on this, because I love the professionalism and knowledge of our officers, and I think it would help us communicate with them if our knowledge was a bit higher, and I think the way to do that is through training.
Training can only be a good thing. I think that there was a hope that an item later in the agenda, which is the self-assessment of effectiveness, there was a hope that the results of that would dictate a little bit of a training needs analysis, but I believe the response rates have been quite low. So I guess we'll come back around to this in item 10, but if I can urge now people to respond to those questionnaires, we might be able to create a training programme that's relevant for members, and we can include PMO in that. Thank you, though. Good point. Are there any more questions or comments on PMO? Thanks, members. We'll move on then to item number 10 on the agenda, which is the self-assessment of effectiveness. I don't really need to say much more on that. Attendance response rates are quite low. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but in order to politely encourage responses, I'd just like to remind members that the response rate will be reported on the governance statement this year. So it's probably a report we don't want our names on. We've tried a carrot, there's your stick. If we can have responses to that effectiveness questionnaire as soon as possible, it really will help us. It's not mandatory, but it would be a great coup. Councillor Kerr.
Perhaps all members of the committee could be sent an email if they have not yet responded, just as a separate reminder.
We can arrange that. Thank you. Perhaps even including the questionnaire in case that members don't have it to hand. I don't suppose there's much more to say on that, but does anybody want to comment on that? Okay, thanks, members. Moving on then, item number 11 is the updated committee work programme, 24-25.
Just a couple of things I wanted to mention, Chair. There's a few reports down for today's meeting that haven't been tabled. There's the information governance update, which hopefully will include the ICO report and that in there. The waivers update as well. So the aim is to slip these back to the March meeting, which then puts more pressure on the March meeting. However, there's a couple of items in the March meeting that I think could slip. We've added in the risk management strategy and handbook refresh to the March meeting at the request of Catherine, so that's on there now. But the last two items on there, the local code of governance, I think could be slipped, mainly because SIP for Solace have now just put out another consultation document. Seems to be lots of consultation documents and talking about what the value is of the local code of governance and the annual governance statement and how authorities should respond to those. So again, it'd be worth waiting to see what comes out of the consultation document that SIPFA put out on those before refreshing the local code of governance. But it also have an impact on the way the annual governance statement is produced as well, which has been something that this committee has, for a number of years now, questioned the output and the design of it, and looking for a change in design. We say that a former chair had been on a SIPFA course and had seen some other annual governance statements and had questioned the then Section 151 officer to implement these changes, which never actually happened, and she got a bit disappointed about that. But yeah, and then the other one is the counter-fraud, anti-bribery and corruption policy and framework. I think that could slip as well. We've got one, there's one in place, so it's not like there isn't anything. It's just it's due now for review and update. But again, I need to have a chat with Section 151 officer as to how she wants to take that forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely we'll be in for an all-day meeting at this rate, so I understand some things need to defer. Yeah. Any members have questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next item then is the date of the next meeting, which is to be Wednesday the 26th of March, excluding that we resolved today that we're going to have a special meeting in February. We'll confirm the date of that as soon as possible. Other than that, I just want to thank everybody for attending and for your interaction.